Welcome back to the Left Library. In Chapter 11, the concept of relative surplus value, Marx shifts the focus from last chapter's absolute surplus value, which was increasing surplus by lengthening the working day, to relative surplus value, which is increasing surplus by making labour more productive. This chapter explains how capitalists extract more surplus value without necessarily extending working hours. Instead, they do this through technological advancements, efficiency, and the reorganization of labor. Relative surplus value arises when the value of labor power is reduced, even while the length of the working day remains unchanged. How? This happens by increasing productivity. Marx writes, the production of relative surplus value turns on increasing the productivity of labor, so that the same amount of labor produces a greater mass of commodities. So, for example, a worker might produce 5 shirts in 8 hours. Through new machinery or better organization, they may now produce 10 shirts in the same time. So while the cost of each shirt drops, the surplus extracted from their labor increases. Marx emphasizes that relative surplus value depends on increasing productivity across society. This happens through, 3 main ways that he lays out, being technological innovations, which are machines that make labor faster and more efficient. 2, the division of labor, where breaking down complex tasks into smaller repetitive steps. And 3, economies of scale, which is producing in large quantities to reduce the cost per unit. These techniques allow each worker to produce more value in less time, but the wages they may receive remain tied to the cost of maintaining their labor power, not the value in total that they produce. Marx writes, open quote, productivity is the key to reducing the value of labor power while maintaining or increasing the capitalist profits, end quote. The capitalist drive for relative surplus value also impacts the cost of workers' survival by making basic goods like food, clothing, and shelter cheaper through increased productivity. The value of labor power decreases. If the cost of bread, for example, is reduced through mass industrial baking, a worker's wage might not need to increase because their cost of living has gone down. Marx explains, open quote, the value of labor power depends on the value of the commodities required for the worker's subsistence, end quote. But here's the catch. While the cost of living might decrease, the amount of surplus value extracted increases. This causes the gap between what workers produce and what they're paid to grow wider. Next, Marx highlights that the pursuit of relative surplus value drives constant productivity increases, but that this comes at a cost. Workers face intensified exploitation as they're pushed to produce more in the same amount of time, often at the expense of their own health. Meanwhile, technological advancements displace skilled labor, creating job insecurity and constantly widening inequality. While productivity grows, the benefits go to the capitalist class, leaving workers with stagnant wages and worsening conditions. Marx concludes, open quote, the more productive the worker, the more he becomes a slave of the system, end quote. So what did we learn in Chapter 11? Here, Marx introduces relative surplus value as the capitalist tool for extracting more profit without extending the working day. By increasing productivity, cheapening necessities, and driving technical innovation, capitalists reduce the value of labor power while maximizing surplus value. However, this drive comes at a human cost: intensified work, job insecurity, and forever growing inequality. In the next chapter, Marx will explore how the division of labor and the manufacturing processes are central to increasing productivity and consequently relative surplus value. In Chapter 12, Marx explores how the division of labour and the rise of manufacturing revolutionised production under capitalism. This chapter examines how breaking tasks into specialised roles increases productivity while also alienating workers from their labour. At the end of this chapter, you'll understand why the division of labour is central to capitalist production and how it intensifies exploitation. So, what is the division of labour? The division of labour refers to breaking down the production process into smaller, specialised tasks performed by different workers. Instead of one person making an entire product, each worker focuses on a single step. For example, in a workshop making pins, one worker draws out the wire, another cuts it, and another sharpens it at the end. Marx writes, open quote, "The division of labour simplifies each task, allowing the capitalist to extract greater productivity from the workforce." End quote. This specialization has two major effects. One, it increases productivity because workers can focus on mastering one specific task. And two, it reduces the workers' control over the production process, making them dependent on the capitalist who owns the tools and materials. Next, Marx contrasts two stages in the development of production. The first, cooperation, an earlier stage where workers perform similar tasks collectively, sharing resources and space. During this period, each worker still retains some independence and skill over their craft. The second stage, manufacture. Under capitalism, manufacture introduced this systematic division of labour, where workers became specialised in one step of production. This new structure wasn't just about working together, it was about organising the labour hierarchy to maximise efficiency. Marx explains, manufacture seizes upon labour power and subdivides it into individual specialised functions, reducing the worker to a fragment of himself. While cooperation harnessed the collective power of workers, manufacture disempowered them by fragmenting their roles and removing their craft. Then, Marx emphasizes how the division of labor under manufacture transforms the worker into a mere appendage of the machine. This process alienates workers in several ways. First, the loss of skill. Now, workers no longer master an entire craft, they perform repetitive, mindless tasks. Over time, their skills become narrow and limited to a single function. Two, the dependence on capitalists. Now, the workers' fragmented role means that they can no longer produce independently. They rely entirely on the tools, materials, and organization provided by the capitalist. 3. Exhaustion and monotony, where repetition leads to physical and mental fatigue, reducing the worker's quality of life. Marx writes, the worker becomes poorer the more wealth he produces. The increasing productivity of labor impoverishes the laborer. For the capitalist, the division of labor is a powerful tool for increasing relative surplus value. By fragmenting tasks, the capitalist reduces the value of labor power, since less training or skill is needed. Then, specialized workers produce goods faster, increasing productivity and profits without raising wages. However, this comes at the workers' expense. Their labor becomes more replaceable and mechanized, increasing job insecurity. Also, they lose connection to the final product, intensifying their alienation. Marx explains, the division of labor in manufacture increases productivity at the cost of reducing the worker to being a cog in the capitalist machine. Finally, in this chapter, Marx situates the rise of manufacture in its historical context. explaining how it emerged during the transition from feudalism to capitalism. He shows how early manufacture took over independent crafts, centralizing production under capitalist control. Then, by reorganizing labor into specialized roles, capitalists dismantled the traditional guild system, stripping workers of their autonomy. Marx writes, "The workshop of the medieval craftsman becomes the factory of the capitalist entrepreneur." This transition marked a turning point, where production no longer served local needs, but the broader demands of the capitalist market. So, what did we learn in Chapter 12? In Chapter 12, Marx reveals how the division of labor and manufacture transformed production under capitalism. By fragmenting tasks under the division of labor, capitalists increased productivity and surplus value while alienating workers further from their labor. The efficiency of the system, we learned, came at the workers' cost, with them losing autonomy, skill, and well-being over time. In the next chapter, Marx will explore how machinery and modern industry take the logic of manufacture to an entirely new level, revolutionizing production and intensifying exploitation even further. In Chapter 13, Marx examines how the introduction of machinery and the rise of modern industry have revolutionized production under capitalism. He explains how machinery increases productivity and relative surplus value while also intensifying worker exploitation. By replacing skilled labor with mechanical processes, machinery alienates workers even further and fundamentally alters the dynamics of the labor process. This chapter also highlights how technological innovation, though often framed as progress, serves primarily to enhance the power and profit of the capitalist. Marx begins by describing how machinery transforms the production process. Unlike tools, which are extensions of the worker's skill, machinery dominates the worker, reducing their role to merely tending and maintaining the machine. This mechanization allows for immense increases in productivity. A single machine can perform the work of many workers, reducing the cost of production and increasing surplus value. Marx explains that the machine, while it increases the productiveness of labor, also reduces labor to a mere cog in the system. By introducing machinery, capitalists no longer relied on skilled labor. Instead, they hire unskilled workers to operate the machines, making labor more replaceable and a lot cheaper. This shift reduces the bargaining power of workers and gives capitalists greater control over the production process. The introduction of machinery is a key method for increasing relative surplus value. By making production faster and more efficient, machines reduce the value of commodities, including the goods workers need to survive. As the cost of living decreases, the value of labor power also decreases, allowing capitalists to pay workers less while extracting more surplus value. Marx emphasizes, open quote, "Machinery cheapens commodities, and with it, the cost of reproducing the worker," end quote. However, the benefits of this increased efficiency are captured almost entirely by the capitalist. Workers, despite producing more than ever, see no significant improvement in their wages or working conditions. Machinery fundamentally alters the experience of work. Tasks that once required skill and creativity are replaced with repetitive, monotonous motions dictated by the machine. Workers are alienated not only from the product of their labor, but also from the labor process itself. Marx writes, open quote, "The machine becomes the master of the worker, dictating the pace and nature of the work," end quote. Additionally, machinery intensifies exploitation. It allows for the lengthening of the working day, the intensification of labor, and the replacement of adult workers with cheaper labour, such as women and children. This creates a workforce that is more vulnerable and easier to exploit. One of the most significant effects of the machinery is the creation of a reserve army of labour. This is a surplus population of unemployed and underemployed workers. As machines replace workers, these displaced individuals form a pool of labour that capitalists can draw upon to drive down wages and weaken worker resistance. This surplus labour force ensures that the workers remain disposable and that labour markets are perpetually in favour of capital. Marx concludes this section that machinery, far from being a neutral force of progress, are actually a tool of domination and exploitation under capitalism. He states, the development of machinery reduces labour to a state of dependence while fortifying the power of capital. End quote. So, what did we learn in chapter 13? Here, Marx shows us how machinery and modern industry transform the production process, increasing productivity and surplus value while deepening worker exploitation. Machines are not just tools, they're instruments of capitalist control that cheapen labour, displace workers, and intensify inequality. Before moving on to part 5, let's recap the key insights from part 4, the production of relative surplus value. When Marx analysed how capitalism restructures labour and technology to maximise profit, relative surplus value is not just about increasing productivity, it's also a social force that reshapes the way we work and live. Marx began part 4 with chapter 11, where he introduced the concept of relative surplus value. Unlike absolute surplus value, which extends the working day, relative surplus value increases profit by reducing the necessary labour time required to produce goods. This is achieved through advances in productivity, often by reorganising labour and introducing new technology. Next, in chapter 12, Marx demonstrated how the division of labour and manufacture creates relative surplus value by fragmenting work into specialised tasks. This increases efficiency, but also further alienates workers. Then, chapter 13, he showed us how machinery and modern industry take this process even further, replacing skilled labour, intensifying workloads more, and creating a reserve army of labour